The market had been pricing in, with roughly a 90% probability, another rate cut by the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, at its next meeting in December. The FOMC did deliver on a highly anticipated 25 basis point cut in October, but Fed Chair Jay Powell went out of his way to downplay the likelihood of another cut in December. Without ruling it out, he remarked several times during his October press briefing that another rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion. In fact, he said a December cut is far from a foregone conclusion. Let's take a closer look. The post-meeting policy statement and Powell's remarks continue to highlight that downside risks to employment rose in recent months and that inflation has moved up since earlier this year. Powell noted that with risks to inflation tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside, the committee faces a challenging situation. He added that there is no risk-free path for policy as the committee navigates this tension between its employment and inflation goals. Powell noted several times that there were strongly differing views among policymakers about how to proceed at the December meeting. He suggested that ongoing tension between the committee's policy goals, different policymaker forecasts, and different risk tolerance among policymakers account for this strong divergence of views. He also noted that some policymakers currently prefer to pause in December and reassess the balance of risks then. We have long expected that the FOMC would eventually slow its pace of rate cuts from cutting at 3 consecutive meetings starting in September to skipping a meeting or two starting in early 2026. Powell's remarks at his October press conference increased the risk that such slowing could come a little earlier, in December. That said, we continue to see the case for further rate cuts next year as intact. Powell himself volunteered that he still sees the FOMC's policy stance as modestly restrictive and suggested that further easing will be needed to bring about a neutral policy stance.